Thank you everyone for the opportunity to speak on this topic. Laneway housing is true to my heart because it's one of those things that should be happening a lot more in a city that has an abundance of laneways, but for various reasons have been obstructed in achieving that goal. You'd see a few here, a few there, but it was only recently that it's opened up. So this is going to be a little bit about kind of walk through a bit of the background of where things are coming from, what brought us to the point where we are today, the study that was undertaken by the city in order to try and open up approvals for laneway housing, the policy and zoning changes that occurred that allow for what is currently permitted in a select area of the city, what you need to do to get your approvals, and just some concluding thoughts of what I think about these changes and whether they go far enough. Spoiler alert, they don't. So what's the next slide? So just a bit of background. City describes laneway house as, they call it laneway suite. I'm going to be using laneway house, laneway suite interchangeably through this presentation, but it is a house on the same lot as a detached house, semi-detached house, or townhouse generally located in the rear yard abutting a laneway. It's important to note the line, it is a house on the same lot as a detached house. That is going to be the unifying theme in the approvals that the city has enshrined as part of the recent amendments to the official plan and zoning. They are subordinate in scale, completely detached from the main house, and may have outdoor access via both the side yard of the main house or the lane. Slides. My view on laneway housing is that it provides for additional income as a second suite rental as one opportunity. It establishes more modern micro-housing in the city that are more affordable than current housing stocks, which is happening in other cities across Canada. It reflects a gentle form of intensification without compromising the main dwelling itself. If you have a detached garage already and you're building up or you're slightly building out, you're not fundamentally impacting that main dwelling. It makes use of unutilized infrastructure, such as the laneways, and it helps to activate that space. What becomes dead space now becomes vibrant space. And it supports aging in place. And one of the case studies that I talk about in this example is a specific age in place example that didn't follow these rules. Next slide. So where would laneway housing go? I'm going to thank the study for preparing this graphic. I did not. But it's a great graphic to show. This is only a portion of the city. The total number of laneways in the city, 2,433, 295. When I look at this, I see opportunity. But switch to the next slide. The issue always is most of them are located in what is described as the neighborhoods. And the neighborhoods are their own animal, as many of you who have worked in established neighborhoods in the city. They become very hard to change, and under policy direction by the city, anything that veers too far from the existing context or the prevailing housing pattern tends to be rejected or has to go through a very difficult fight in order to do something a little bit different. Sorry, this says who else has lanes, but really this is kind of who benefits from this. So laneway housing itself is a part of what a lot of people call the missing middle housing. And while it's not on this list, it's one of those kind of innovative forms, I would say kind of right down by duplex, triplex, fourplex, that is really needed in mature cities with mature neighborhoods where you want to intensify, but not everything has to happen in a multi-use development. When you go in City of Toronto's neighborhoods, you can see that there's existing stock of mature walk-up apartments, semis, row houses, but trying to do that today becomes such an obstacle, such an uphill climb. So the hope is that with the approval of these laneway houses, this is just a starting point in which other forms of housing starts to become more acceptable within those established neighborhoods. So just who else is doing laneway housing? This is just a few. Ottawa recently passed new bylaws to allow for coach housing, aka laneway housing, is a way to achieve more affordable housing, which is always key. The other in Montreal, in my view, it's kind of one of the most urban forms of laneways. You can walk through the laneways, it's that historic city with a lot of kind of 3-4-story kind of walk-up built form, very close relationship laneways, but a lot of underused laneways, and there's a movement to try and use some of these abandoned laneways and turn them into active green spaces. Just one example here. I think this is a Globe and Mail article I was speaking to it. Next one, Vancouver. Obviously, they've been promoting laneways since 2009. Issued 8 permits so far, looking to expand that program. Again, it's all about affordability, affordable housing, attainable housing, but doing something that's really hitting a missing market. So just in general, from a planning perspective and the structure, policies support affordable housing, support laneway housing. In the Planning Act, the Strong Communities Act of Affordable Housing, this was a recent change in the Planning Act that required municipalities to authorize second suites in their official plans. Before, it became a really big obstacle to try and allow those to happen. With changes to the Act, it became a right to be able to have that ability to do a second suite. So whether it was within the dwelling or whether it was a separate component on that property. And added to that, the long-term affordable housing strategy added a number of elements that help to reduce the cost of constructing those second suites. That includes changing the building code to reduce the cost of the construction itself of any dwelling unit, and exempting them from development charges, which is always important. Next slide. And from a provincial policy statement perspective, some motherhood language that always benefits laneway houses that we always use to justify.
Yeah, maybe you can just explain to people what.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Just because some people may not be familiar with this.
Yeah. If I'm saying something you guys don't understand, let me know. I live in my planning world. Sometimes I have to come down. If we take a step back, the previous slide, Planning Act. This is what governs what I do. This is what governs all land use planning and development in Ontario. It's the rules that establish things like your 20-day appeal period and the timing of how long a minor variance application should happen, and the documents that you're supposed to submit with your applications. All of this is under the Planning Act. This governs everything. And it changes as every government comes in, and I'm expecting it to change again. But that really is the hierarchy that sets the framework. And out of that, to the next slide, the provincial policy statement sets the agenda for the government as they go forward. This is the one that's supposed to change all the time as government changes, but the government keeps changing more than they should. So this lays out what all municipalities in Ontario must do. So healthy livable communities are sustained by an appropriate range and mix of residential uses, including second units, affordable housing, and housing for older persons. So a city like Toronto, or Mississauga, or Vaughan, they need to ensure that whatever policies they're putting in their plan achieves that goal. Same thing with promoting cost-effective development patterns and standards to minimize land consumption and servicing costs. I like these policies because what they do is they say, if I'm doing a laneway house, if I'm doing a laneway suite, I am doing exactly what the province is looking for me to do. Mix and range of housing, affordable, cost-effective, minimizing land consumption, all the things that are beneficial to provincial objectives, which is minimizing the use of infrastructure and creating more sustainable and effective development. The next slide. Following under that is the growth plan, which deals with our Greater Golden Horseshoe specifically, which is another layer of policy control, but again, languages that support what we're talking about. Provide for a diverse range and mix of housing options, including second units and affordable housing to accommodate people of all stages of life and to accommodate the needs of all household sizes and income. So again, all of these compact built form, attractive, vibrant public realm. While they're large statements, they help to justify these type of forms in neighborhoods. So why has it been so difficult to do these? And I've shown here the contrast of your existing stable neighborhoods and change that continues to be real again. So, number of reasons, a platform to oppose any change by virtue of amendments needed to a city's bylaw. As soon as you need a minor variance, you become a target. You become a target to anyone in the neighborhood.
My guy.
There we go.
Yes. I concur.
So, and for a laneway house, at least until recently, doing something like that is an automatic variance. Lack of appreciation of what the bylaw permits versus what has been generally underbuilt in neighborhoods. If you look across the city, houses do not maximize what is actually permitted under the zoning bylaw. So when you try to maximize, you can maximize without having to get any variances and everything is fine. As soon as you go slightly beyond that, let's say you need a side yard setback, all of a sudden everything is in question. Everything's in question. The committee of adjustment process that gives substantial weight on public anecdotal concerns and evidence, and an aggressive interpretation of city official plan policies by city staff. It's just my opinion. So that there have been past technical reasons to refuse or deny having laneway houses, one being concerned with the loss of privacy, overlook, and shadow impacts by having these, both off lots and on the lots themselves. Concerns over the condition of existing lanes. You know, have they been maintained well? Are they in a bad condition? Do we want people walking down there? Is it safe? Again, lack of safe movement, and lack of lighting and sidewalks, lack of municipal infrastructure and lanes to support new dwellings. That was, in my view, the biggest one that prevented them from happening. The majority, in fact, the vast majority of laneways don't have servicing in them, except for drainage. So connecting to it had to come either from the house or through an easement to the house. Otherwise, you're going through a public right-of-way, which is the lane. So that was always an issue to deal with. Concerns over emergency service access, I'd say that's second. And the reason behind that was really in relation to how do you get, if you're in a lane and you can't get through the lane, what is your secondary way to get to someone to save them? Is there enough room to get a gurney through if someone has a health problem? Those are all the considerations that were preventing these type of developments and compliance with the city's neighborhood policies. So the official plan also has very strong language in it that requires development to respect and reinforce the existing physical character of buildings, streetscapes, and open spaces. So if you wanted to go in, do a laneway house, sever that house, non-starter. Because now you're creating a lot that's undersized in comparison to the rest of the neighborhood. Same thing, no change, we made the zoning or minor variances that are out in keeping with the physical character of the neighborhood. And to that, OPA 320, which was recently approved, this was an amendment to the city's official plan, amending the neighborhood policies, strengthen those policies to turn the words like existing to prevailing. So no longer is it just you have to be similar to what's in the neighborhood, you have to be similar to what is in the majority of the neighborhood. So if the majority of the neighborhood is single attached dwellings, and you're doing a laneway house, or any other type of form, unlikely you're going to get city support for it. And new rules on establishing and determining character. No longer can you be just similar to a house that's beside you or a house that's across from you. You have to be what's similar beside you, across the street from you, on the block that you're in, and in the entire neighborhood as you define it. So that's a really hard test. That essentially says we're putting our neighborhoods in a glass box. And any change that you do has to be identical to what's happening. So that obviously is a problem for things like laneways. Next one. So the study. I'm going to try and go through this really quickly because the study informed what happened to the city's official plan and zoning. But the city initiated the study to review and consult with the community on the potential for doing laneways. They wanted it to happen. There were a number of progressive councilors that said, we gotta make this happen. They were directed to make those changes, and this was encouraged by this report that was undertaken called Laneway Suites, a New Housing Typology. Let's go quickly through some of the components in there. They characterized the laneway suite as non-severable, intended to be used for rental housing, for family members, or for aging in place. This is reinforcing that this is one property. You're putting a secondary suite on this property but it's all one piece. Servicing water, electrical, all are coming from the principal residence. So that is solving that issue. And recognized under provincial legislation as a means of supporting intensification and increasing low-rise neighborhood-oriented rental stock. So again, specific direction in relation to this. So just high level, this is what they're recommending. It should be created in all these types of housing, singles, semis, duplexes, row houses. Next slide.
Sorry, before we jump, did people know how to check the zoning on the property? So you go on to, just Google it. Google City of Toronto zoning map, I think that's what it is.
I just do Toronto map. Toronto zoning map.
Toronto zoning map, they'll pull up this kind of semi-interactive Google map, which lets you look at various addresses.
I don't know if we're able to do it right now.
Yeah, we can do it right now. But basically, you punch in an address. It's super simple. You punch in an address, and then it gives you, you know, the area you're looking at. It'll give you this weird code in brackets. It's like bracket. It'll be R and then something something something. What Eldon is saying is, if it's R and it doesn't matter what you have after that, you're good for a laneway suite.
Yeah.
There are different letter codes that are used, but if you see R something something something, that's good.
Yeah. Permitted in all our zones.
Yes.
Our zones.
You look at that laneway, because I have a detached backyard and the back garage back of my yard.
So where was that?
I have a detached garage, so there's an existing structure there. It's 1.5 to 2 stories, but I don't have a laneway, I just have a driveway.
It's a
So-
within 150 feet. So if it's within 150 feet of the main street, then
Is that a yes or no? If it's within 100?
if it's within 150 feet of the, so where your property is against the, from the main street to that garage, if it's within 150 feet, then you might be able to.
Then it might be.
It might be.
Yeah, because I back on Smooth Island.
Oh, that's interesting.
Oh.
I know, like the areas that are for sure given the thumbs up are the named laneways. So there's a bunch of laneways out there where they've already given them names and you know through that addresses. If you're got a named laneway or you're looking at purchasing a place with a named laneway and it's our zone, there's a good chance you can you're in the right kind of zone.
Yeah, I got a question. So I've got a mutual drive with my neighbor, which goes to the backyard, and in my backyard, he has a garage and I have a garage. Where do I fall in this whole laneway? There is no laneway,
Yeah.
but could I build a structure back there? or I just don't ask anyone. Don't ask
So let me go through it first, and then I'll get
Sure.
to that question.
Sorry.
I think it's a little more complicated than that. So it's permitted as a third unit, so everyone's allowed 2 units as of right. It's permitted as a third unit. If you have a fourplex, it's permitted as a fourth. If you have a fiveplex, it's permitted as a 5th unit. They recommended angular planes to protect for separation. This is the way that they were controlling massing. And this ends up in the zoning in a different way. But what essentially saying is that your rear wall adjacent to a lane is 6 meters high, and your garden wall or the internal wall would be a maximum of 4 meters high. And what that allows is that for this kind of 45-degree angular plane pitched roof, as you can see right here, and then this 30-degree angular plane pitched on the opposite side. And that's how they intend to control the massing of the height. What it's doing is shrink wrapping it. Next.
So can I ask a question? They're concerned about the height. I get that because there's all these height regulations. How does it being angular control for the height? Like if
So-
you had a flat roof, you could still be the same height, right?
So there's a couple of things that are connected to this. The reason why they use the angular plane, it's one of the universal principles of design that provides for 3 things. Transition, in terms of density, reduces overlook and protects for privacy, and protects for shadow impact. So 45 degrees is supposed to protect for, if there's a sun that's right here,
Right. It's gonna
usually the
still go
sun
down
is
the
usually about 45 degrees up in the sky, and so you will get sun into the rear yard.
Okay.
That's the intent of the 45 degree angle plane.
So I was wondering why all the laneway houses are
Yeah.
shaped like this.
There's
It's a
yeah.
weird shape.
For this one, I don't know why they would even suggest this. There's no intent for that.
Right. And then I guess the privacy side is you're really looking only windows facing out from that bedroom area into
That's
the
right.
laneway.
So the idea is like you're at the ground level here, but at the
Right.
lane you can have your your 2 levels at the back, and that doesn't permit you from having things such as dormers,
Okay.
within that facade, which is controlling how much vision or windows or open clear views you have within the yards. Again, and this is acceptable by the city because they're recognizing it's one lot, so there's a shared relationship between people who live in the main dwelling and people in the others. Sorry. So there are some typical setbacks that are required from the laneway house to the rear lot line. It's 0 meters it's 0 meters for your side yards. It's 5 meters between the house, and it's 1 meters from your actual lot line to the lane. Footprints, they're recommending a minimum and maximum amount. So maximum 8 meters in either direction. That's the recommendation. I think you end up, when you have a 2-story dwelling, you end up with about 800 square feet for the type of dwelling that you're looking at. This is the issue that we were talking about here in terms of access. And this kind of goes to the point that was discussed about what happens if you have, a dwelling that's, on a shared driveway. I can't remember who asked that. Shared driveway, but it's not backing onto a lane. You need to be in close proximity to a hydrant. So, and that's simply for emergency service purposes. So you need to be about 45-meter travel distance to a hydrant, and then another 45-meter travel distance from the edge of your curb to that laneway house. And if you can't do that, then it has to be sprinklered. Those are the kind of rules. Sprinkling obviously isn't an added cost, but it's something that used to be an issue in terms of building laneway houses. There's controls of how much windows you can have along those facades themselves. Hi.
So sorry, quick question before you. Can you go back?
Let's go back.
So the hydrants, let's say somewhere in another house.
Yeah.
Is that you need to count all of that
No, this is about.
from the street or from the?
This is from the street.
Oh, from the street. Oh.
So this is actually from the curb. Travel distance to
From
the
the
curb
curb.
line.
Not
So
from
this
the
is a
hydrant.
fire truck sitting right here,
Oh.
getting ready to save you. It's like I'm coming in. I'm gonna get you. I'm bringing you out. We need to have clearance of 0.9 meters in between here as a minimum clear path in order to have this and access back. And if you don't have that, then you need to meet the other parameters in terms of the fire distance.
What would happen to the parking situation? Let's say you have a garage, and you remove the garage and you build laneway housing. What happened to the car? Where are you gonna park the car?
So I'm gonna get to that.
Just curious.
Laneway houses are exempt from required parking. So you don't have to provide any parking for the laneway house.
But is there a question about the existing property if it had parking?
You can build it into the laneway house.
Yeah. So if you, I think you had a picture of it, a slide or two back.
Yeah,
So
you
the
switch
first
back.
level, yeah. So if you look at the bottom left there, see the parking remains. They put it underneath, and then the laneway house is built on top.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So you don't lose your parking.
So you don't lose your parking. So if you have parking for unit 1 and 2, that's where they would be.
Makes
Then
sense,
unit
yeah.
3 is not required to have additional parking.
Yeah.
So
And in doing this, because this is relatively new, I also got to educate myself. So it's a benefit for me too, in terms of new rules, because previously everything was a variance to allow for these things to happen. So it didn't matter what the city said. We're varying everything. We've got a list of 20 variances when things happen.
And like a variance, is a major pain in the ass. I can't even begin to describe. Like every time you ask for a variance, it's basically you have to go to a committee and you have to put forth your case, and each one of those like changes from the zone, they could shoot down and say no.
Yeah.
So the more variances you have, the more opportunities they have to shoot you down.
Actually, I'll give you just a personal anecdote. The reason I was late today was because I was actually arguing and negotiating with the neighbors where we went to committee of adjustments, we got approved, and then they appealed the committee's decision. So that's where we are right
And-
now. So like your
yeah.
neighbors feel like they have control over your property and like the guy's literally, he's an engineer. He's literally trying to redesign our house. I'm like, no, our architect's already designed our house, we're good. So it's a, like Nick said, it's a big deal. So the fact that you can go and build this without asking anyone's permission is a really big deal.
Yeah.
Because this used to be variance.
This used to be you weren't allowed to do this.
Yeah. Now you can.
And the time is like at least, what is the wait time in Toronto now? 5 minutes?
Well, it depends. If it's South District, it's like at least 6
Yeah.
between the time you submit the application to the time you get a hearing because they're so backed up.
And it's
If
like
it's a Tobago,
Toronto-
you know, it's 3.
Yeah, and the district is like Toronto and East York. It's like the most busiest
Yeah.
residential areas. They lump that all together.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of people are taking pictures besides the being available.
They will be on the website, our website.
Yeah, I can make this available.
To share the slides.
There's a second part of this, and I'm not going to go through as detail because this kind of hits all the high levels, but it's actually the sections that they did in the official plan, to change the official plan, and the sections in the zoning bylaw that they changed, so that you know that these are the things that have happened, and I'll let you build a laneway house as of right, which is amazing. Like, you just go in and get your permit. You don't need me, just go in. But as soon as you need a variance,
No, but we still need your slides.
Sorry.
Yeah, so fantastic, this is fantastic information, but now, just out of curiosity, in the laneway, you're able to get, it seems like, remove the garage and make a 2-story laneway house. Is there an ability of turning that itself into a duplex, or is that not?
Yes. So you can build on existing infrastructure. So if you have an existing garage, you can use that as a right, so long as you don't, as you're maintaining the principles of the bylaw. So if it's already 2 stories, you can convert that into what you need it to be without
So
having to
the
modify.
principal residence into a duplex, but can you make the door,
I think what your question
Oh,
is,
sorry.
like, can I have 4? Can I go from 2 units to 4 units, right?
Oh,
we're investors here. We're trying to figure out densification. Like, everybody's like, I'm gonna
let's say I could make the principal residence into a duplex, and I also make the laneway house into a duplex.
No.
So 3 is the maximum at this point.
Well, no, I mean, if you have permissions for a triplex on your property,
Right.
you
But
can
that's
or a
just-
fourplex, you can do that.
But like a regular,
Yeah, but the
Townhouse
intention
is
is in the fourplex, it specifically says that that is your 4th unit. So that's, the laneway house is not intended to be your 3rd and 4th.
So I think what's, a laneway house isn't giving you additional if you've only been zoned or approved for X number of units, right? So if you're approved for 3 units on that piece of land, your laneway house is that 3rd unit, right?
Yeah.
It's
Can your
not,
house
you
be
already
more
have
than
3 and now you're adding a 4th, right?
Sorry.
Because the idea of the laneway house was to bring people out of the basement and put them into the laneway
Yeah,
house.
but you can still have that basement unit as your
Yeah.
2nd unit, and have a suite as a 3rd unit.
So can you have 3 suites even on
You can have 3 on the entire
regular R zoned
Yep.
property? Oh.
Yeah.
So
That's like a laneway house.
it's a regular single family house.
I was hoping for 4.
It can't be that. It can be 1 unit, and you can have 2 units in the main house.
Okay, but
Yeah.
you can't, even though you're allowed 3, 2 of them
You
can't
can't-
be in the laneway house and
Yeah,
1 in the main.
I want to see how you're gonna do that. Like, kind of, is that like 400 and 400? Is that's gonna be really tight?
Two levels?
Oh, like so 1 or 2. Yeah, maybe. But I think the intent. I mean, I understand what you're saying,
Yeah.
but I think you need a variance to do that. I think that's part of the problem.
What was the thing that you were talking about, if you had an existing 2-story structure,
You can utilize that structure as of right. So long as, let's say you have
but
a
it's
2-story
bigger than,
structure.
let's say, the total allowable area of, let's say you said 400 square foot?
So what happens is that through the zoning, the laneway house itself doesn't count towards FSI. It doesn't count towards those general principles of development. What they do control, however, is rear yard coverage, separation, but they recognize existing footprints. So if you want to take an existing footprint, that's your as of right footprint. And if you want to convert that into a suite, you can do that. That's your benefit because it's an existing situation where that relationship already exists. So, but if you want to take that and you want to now, like let's say, add a second story to it, that now automatically puts you into the world of having to meet the bylaw. Yeah.
So just to make sure I understand correctly, if your land permits you to have a fourplex and you currently have a duplex, and you can build a laneway home, you can technically build that laneway home to be 2 stories and have 2 units in it, and you end up with a fourplex.
No, that is.
Even if you're permitted for
the third time, no. It is 1 unit in the back.
Okay, so laneway house can only have 1 unit.
That's right.
Okay. Alright.
Yes.
Makes sense.
You want more than 1
garage,
unit?
That's not.
Committee of adjustment. If it's big enough to accommodate more than 1 unit, absolutely, committee of adjustment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there an extra allowance for FSI? If your coverage is 64, are you given an extra 20% or something, or you still have to go to committee and?
No, what happens is it's exempt from the FSI calculation. So if your house is already over on FSI, it doesn't matter because it's only based on setbacks and height and relationship to the main dwelling, which is a benefit. Because otherwise, you'd still be going to the committee of adjustment because there are tons of houses across the city that don't meet their own FSI. So I'm gonna try and go through the rest of this. I just go through the rest of this, and then I'm gonna pause and I'm gonna ask everyone if there's any other questions. And I'll do my case study.
We're so excited.
Let's go to the next slide. So you can do decks and balconies. Pretty much the entire rear lane side you can do a deck or balcony that kind of looks out onto the lane. Unlimited in terms of length. But it's not permitted in relation to the side that faces the main dwelling. And again, parking. LANEWAY Suite adds no additional parking requirements to the lot. Next slide. So just a couple points about double loaded properties. LANEWAY Suites are permitted on properties where a lane abuts a street. But it's not permitted, and I don't know why, where a side lot line abuts a street and a rear lot line abuts another lot. So that goes back to the question that was asked about, I think someone said whether
James.
you have a garage at the back. I haven't looked into this in depth. I think you had an opinion on whether that could happen or not. I'm not 100%, honestly, I'm not 100% sure whether you can, because the thrust is, it's supposed to be on a lane. So if it's just in a backyard, even if it has a side yard, everything seems to suggest that it's a bit of a non-starter. And the reason I say that is because if you're backing on, let's say, to someone else's lot, and you're now going up 2 stories at the back of someone's lot, you have clear view into the backyard, if that's your permission. So to me, it seems like you wouldn't be allowed to do that. But yeah.
So it's a common scenario like a corner lot.
So like this is like a corner lot that has a side frontage, but not a rear frontage.
Yeah.
And this one says, when you're looking at through lots, everything is fine. They want some sort of landscaping along the laneway edge, whether it be soft or whether it be permanent paving or something to that effect. No projection angle plane. Permitted existing structures. New construction must conform to the above requirements. So existing structures are permitted to remain. Great news. New construction, anything beyond those existing structures, you need to meet the bylaw. Next. Yeah, that's just simple stuff. Next. So just generally, the whole point of this is that the gross floor area, lot coverage, and heights are intentionally left out. The reason for that is So you give that flexibility to allow a laneway to actually be achieved without a variance. It eases the process, the complicated zoning requirements, height is controlled by angular plane, as we talked about, the 45-degree angular plane. Lot coverage is controlled by setbacks, so don't worry about lot coverage, it's setbacks. GFA is controlled by these above two elements, height and setbacks.
Everybody know what setbacks are? What GFA is?
No, so, oh, okay.
Not me.
Sorry, so setbacks is the distance between a building and a property line. So if I say you have a 1.2 meter setback from your westerly property line, if that's your property line, this is where you build your building.
Oh, okay.
And GFA is gross floor area, which is your total, your essentially how big your site is. So 800 square feet is your gross floor area.
I think that's where the setbacks are going to increase if you don't have a laneway or something, as long as the laneway is inside.
That's right, yes.
But you'd have to check the legislation, because I was trying to I think that was my impression.
There's a lot of zoning provisions. It really is shrunk wrap. Next slide. Okay, so I'm not going to go through this. Let's skip through this because I kind of talk about it anyways. They amended the OP, they're letting it happen. Next slide. Everything's good. Policies are a very focused window to allow laneway housing in any designation. So anywhere this happens, it's very restrictive. But this is the important point I want to note here. The official plan prohibits the division of land under section 50, 51, 53 of the Planning Act. Those are the sections that are subdivisions. So 51 is consents, 53 is plan of subdivision, or the plan of condominium. So what this says is they don't want you at all to separate lots. So if you wanted to create a separate laneway house on its own property, no way unless you want to amend the official plan. If you're amending the official plan, then the expectation is you also need a zoning bylaw amendment, to allow what you want to do. It becomes a bit of a nightmare. And it becomes a very expensive process where your application fees start.
Sorry, that's
at
for
like,
severing?
pardon?
For severing, for severance?
Yeah, for severance.
Right, that's right.
You're looking at application fees that are probably in the $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 range to even consider something like this. And they would only consider those where the lot pattern respects and reinforces the existing lot pattern of established neighborhood. So there aren't going to be too many laneway houses that have a lot pattern that is going to be similar to the neighborhood. They're always going to be smaller. All servicing can be accommodated, meets the requirements of dwelling on its own right. Water removal can be accommodated, and stormwater management can be accommodated. So, it's a really strict criteria. Not even a plan of condominium where you could do a consent for an easement that would establish a relationship between the severed house and the main house. Just food for thought.
So because they're unable to be severed, and right now there's the only way to invest in it is to actually purchase the main home.
They come as a package, yes, based on these permissions.
Because there is that one home, it's in East York, south of, it was in the news, like one of the smallest homes. It was on Hanson Street. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. It was its own unit, so it's the cheapest house in the city at the time.
So
Yeah.
it's the trouble of
How-
going through severance, but it doesn't make financial sense for the most part. So Alden's saying 60,000, 70,000. That's like the starting point for this.
So that's based on today's rules.
Yeah.
Like the rules as of a couple of months ago. Before these, should have gotten away with it.
So maybe it was before that changes.
Yeah, probably. I'm going to show you my case example is that exact example where it's like a severance and a minor variance for a 3-story laneway house. So breaking all the rules. Before I go into the case study, do you guys have any other questions you wanted to ask? Yeah.
One more. What's a dormer? I always have.
Oh, a dormer is kind of like, okay, so here's your roof. Go back.
There.
That's a dormer.
Yeah.
So it's like a window that pushes out all
Yeah.
You see them all over.
Yeah, it's a big deal for Toronto. Yeah.
For the laneway housing, can you just going down It's like a basement.
You can do a basement,
Yes.
but the basement also has to meet the setbacks.
Okay.
So if your setback is 1 and your setback is 0 and your setback is 5, it goes from the end of, the center of the earth to however high you're permitted. So you can't take advantage of, go all the way under the rear yard and use that as a, an amazing and then secretly make a tunnel and connect to the main house. You can't do that.
This group would make a nice place. They'd make
Yeah.
5 units.
Alright, you had a question back there.
Well, there was a picture of, the garage is all in a row. My sister actually has a house like that. If you go find, you'll see the picture.
Do you wanna go back?
There.
That one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My sister actually has a house that's like that. The garage is in the back of the thing.
Nice.
Is this something that could actually apply for her? In the sense
Yes.
that she could take her garage and make it into a second level.
That's right.
You
But
can
the second level has to meet the provisions of
Yes,
the bylaw.
Yeah.
And even if the other ones haven't gone through this process yet.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
why
yeah.
it's like a big deal. A lot of us have investment properties or live in houses or looking to buy that have garages in the back with these laneways.
So you could literally tomorrow go and start building exactly as long as it meets
As
all
long as you have
the.
your permits.
Yeah.
Wow.
Sir.
Actually, you touched on an interesting point. I saw this house on Dufferin, the area, but it's a massive house. They actually, when they dug out their basement, they dug out the whole backyard right through the garage.
Wow.
And I talked to some architecture friends, and they told me that as long as it's unused space, claimed as an unused space, you can have your basement go all the way to the garage, but you cannot touch garage. They can't be connected.
Yeah, so there's a.
I mean, there's
To
a
that
cost
point, yeah.
associated with it, and you gotta have the
Absolutely.
the roof structures and back all this stuff. But.
So when the City of Toronto brought in the new zoning bylaw 569, 2013, it was supposed to harmonize the city. Anyways, it's a whole different story. But part of the provisions of that new bylaw restricted the basements to the setbacks of the building above it. It was challenged. It was taken to the Ontario Municipal Board, and it came back that the provision was onerous. So, situation where people were building high rises and they had to get relief to bring the parking to the 0 lot line. The argument was that it made no sense. This is unfair because it's inhibiting development. They agreed. The provision in the bylaw was changed, and it allowed the houses to do that. The problem with the laneway houses is it brought in this new bylaw to amend the bylaw, and specifically said for a laneway house, you have to stick to this boundary. So no one challenged it. So what you said is correct. You can do that on your property as far as economical as it makes sense to anyone, but you can't do it for a laneway house.
And another interesting idea that I kind of discussed with someone is that there's a European kind of like car lift garage.
Oh, yeah.
Platform so that you can, it's relatively inexpensive, so you can have your car parking and you can
It
have
kinda
the
goes
lift
into,
go
like, the
down.
basement. Yeah. I've seen that. I know a number of people are interested in doing that. It's actually not that expensive.
Yeah, it's like, I think it was like 30,000, 40,000.
Yeah.
I priced one at 60,000.
Yeah.
It was like the middle level one.
Are there any restrictions on how much space you can dig in your property and put garage in your ground here and expand your basement?
Well, if this is your garage, it's a laneway house. That's as far as you can go. But if it's just a garage, you're not supposed to have a basement for a garage. So, the question is, what are you doing with a basement in your garage? I think there'd be a lot of questions. But I mean, in terms of your main dwelling, I guess what is reasonable for you. The one thing you have to consider when doing that is you have to have a certain percentage of soft landscaping. And if the soft landscaping becomes what is essentially a green roof. I'm not sure how that plays into it
Soft
in terms of
landscaping means
infiltration. So like grass or
nothing underneath it, no construction underneath it. That's what soft landscaping.
yeah, the intent is to like that rain infiltrates into the ground to help reduce the system, you know, the stormwater system for the city. So that's why they're requiring a certain percentage of stop. Even like permeable pavers don't count. So I don't know how that plays into that world. I think that's something you want to test.
So you're asking how far you can dig down?
Well, more like how much space you can have. You like one story down. That's a good question too.
Because you have to have a footing for every
You build like a
every
downward
foot you
skyscraper.
dig down. You have to
It would be pretty expensive.
It's yeah, I know that. I'm not sure.
You try to build a bat cave?
It's not here.
I can go through my example.
Yeah, let's see it.
Like we're gonna like fast forward through a bunch of stuff.
Okay, I can keep going, please.
Go. Okay, back. Yeah, there we go. Case study. Go. Okay. This is a 3-story laneway house I worked on. I worked with a housing builder called Spaces by Rohan. Helped me brought me on board because knew it was going to be complex. 3-story micro house at the back of a row house. This house is 1,200 square feet, over 3 stories. It has a basement. It has space for a small car. Actually, go to the next slide. So it's in the, I guess the north, kind of Queen, Dovercourt, Dundas,
Next door to
Dufferin.
your house.
Yeah, it's my neighborhood. I
There you
don't
go.
think I see it.
Oh, is it? Where do you live?
I live in Boston, south of Dundas.
Oh,
Just up
really?
the street from,
It's right there.
I live this cross.
Oh.
Yeah, just north of the cross.
Oh, hey, laneway house coming in.
Oh.
So we got approval for a lane. This is the lane over here. Northcote, Argyle. The property is 106 Northcote. At the back of the lot was just an existing 1-story shed garage. And what we proposed to do is take that shed garage, take its footprint, and just go up. So that's the context neighborhood. Go to the next slide. What we did in terms of making this application, in order for it to be concrete, we had to put together a pretty strong package of support. So we identified other micro dwellings that existed in the neighborhood, particularly one that was right across the street at 203 Argyle, to show that there's precedent in this neighborhood. That this is a laneway house here, and all we're doing is mirroring that existing example. Next slide. So this is the house itself. And there's a unique piece to it that we had to negotiate with the city. We maintained the existing house. The owner wanted to downsize, move out of the house, keep the existing unit and rent it out as 2 units, and he would just continue to live within the laneway house itself. So it backs onto the lane, but because it also has frontage onto Argyle, we flipped the house and turned the driveway to actually face Argyle, so it would have an Argyle address. And because of that, we chose to sever it.
Because of that, you chose what?
We chose to sever the property
No.
to create its own property separate from the main property.
So you can sell it.
Switch. So basement's a simple basement. Next slide. The ground floor is for a proposed car, like a Mini or other sort of small compact car because it's not the full length. Next floor. So the first floor is kind of where the living space is. The second floor, and the kitchen. And then if you go up to the 3rd floor, it's just your 2 bedrooms, hallway, closet, and another bathroom. And you can see this little walkout. And if you can see this component right here, this is a portion that is cantilevering over the laneway. And typically the city doesn't allow that to happen, but we had a pretty progressive councilor who spoke with city staff who allowed us to do this through an agreement, which they call a strata agreement, which means that it's just a stratified easement over. Yeah, let's go to the next slide and I can show you. Next slide. This portion right here. So this cantilever's over a portion that we are dedicating to the city. And
It's still on the property line.
well, it is right now, but we're giving this to the city. So right now it's on the property line. Tomorrow won't be. And the argument that we made was that A, the height is tall enough that you could run a fire hydrant, like a fire hydrant through it, even though a fire hydrant would never drive through a lane because it's not wide enough anyways. But we also we demonstrated that along the lane, there's a city policy that requires that you give the necessary land in order to get the ultimate widening. If they were to do that, they would have to wait for the redevelopment of the entire street in order for that to happen, or they would have to expropriate the backyards of people's lots to get that. Both of which would take forever or would be too expensive. So they recognize that in reality they're probably never going to get this, but if we allow for this cantilevering, it's not that big a deal. It sets a bit of a precedent. So pretend you didn't see it. Oh, thanks.
Well, so you're saying that you gave some land to the city essentially?
We gave the land to the city. We're required to dedicate land to the city to widen the lane. But the city allowed us to encroach back onto that property.
So if we're looking at the lot size now for this lot size is literally smaller.
Yes. Yeah. The density on this was 3 times FSI. It was crazy.
You're still using the same amount of space, it's just up high.
It's just up high, yeah. And there's the other
Trading,
property
like,
line. It's right
air
there.
for the ground.
What's the
And-
height of this?
I think it's 10 meters. So it meets the height provision, but it doesn't meet, if many of you are familiar with the bylaw, the city's bylaw on height, there's a main wall height. There's a height and then there's a main wall height. And the main wall height is lower than the regular height, and that's designed in order to achieve a peaked roof in their bylaws because they want to replicate that character across the city. The city doesn't like flat roofs. So you can do a flat roof up to 7.5, which only allows you to do probably this 2-story dwelling, or you can do up to 10 meters with a pitched roof, or with a roof that pitches the other way but has the dormers. You guys remember the dormers?
Yeah.
So that's the intent. So we had to get relief from that. We had to get relief from density. We had to get relief from setbacks, parking, from rooftop, terrace, from this canopy component. We had a list of about 20 variances. And I'll just go quickly to the plan. The next slide. So this is the side profile against the lane. And next slide. This is the back. So this is how we demonstrated that there's going to be no overlook and no loss of privacy. Essentially flat wall. And then the next slide. So this is the side where you're looking from the back of the house. And what we were able to demonstrate was that really this is only a small balcony, and this one is really kind of facing south. Next slide.
So that first case that you went through,
Oh, it's just
major
weird.
planning.
Something got mixed up here.
Yep.
Here, go to the next one.
New access.
There we go. Sorry about that. Sorry, what were you saying?
I said the first case that you walked us through that, lots of meeting Eldon, like that's
Yeah,
not-
this is crazy. So in order to make our argument, we had to demonstrate that the neighborhood had a variety of housing types. So this is our analysis of the neighborhood. We also pulled all committee of adjustment decisions within the neighborhood to help demonstrate that there has been a lot of change, so that what we're doing is not outside of the boundaries of change. The next slide. We also looked analysis of density of lots that were virtually equal to 1 times density, which is what was permitted. So we showed that we're not doing anything that's out of character. It's happening in this neighborhood. Next slide. Same thing. Lots which had a gross floor area greater than or equal to 105 square meters, which is what the bylaw was requiring. And what we showed is a really everybody exceeds their bylaw requirement on their dwellings. We're not doing anything fundamentally different. Everything's sensitive, you know, like, this is a neighborhood that is condensed. It is tight, homes have a close relationship. This is accepted. Next slide. We reached out to the neighborhood before we even made application. So we had a community meeting, we invited the neighbors over for a tea party, and then we built a model of the actual home to show it in context. And then we got everybody, all these people, to sign a letter of support, and we submitted that with our application. This was huge. Like, without this, it would have been a problem. This one neighbor to the south, who has her laneway house, didn't want us to use the roof, so we agreed not to use the roof, because she wanted hers to be the highest. Whatever. So this is the kind of legwork that we had to do. Next slide. So what ended up happening was we went to the Committee of Adjustment. Planning staff recommended refusal. We met with planning staff and the counselor, and we said, can you change your mind on this? Like, this is doing all the right things. They said, well, this is going to be our opinion. It's up to you to make the argument to committee. So we made the argument to committee. No one showed up in opposition. We got transportation on board. Everyone's on board except for planning. The committee refused it because they thought it was too many variances. That's the only reason why they refused it.
So
Too many variances. They said, oh, you know, it looks appropriate, but there's a lot of variances here. I'm going to recommend refusal. It's the power of the committee. So we went to TLAB on this, Toronto Local Appeal Body. Uncontested. City did not send anyone because the councillor did not direct anyone to go. No one from the public or the community showed up. I gave my evidence, and it was approved. But that whole process, doing all of that, took 1 year and 9 months. So
How many hours did you have to build?
I had a strict budget. I had a strict budget. I had to eat time because I wanted my client to get this approval. How many hours? I couldn't quantify it.
It was a lot.
It was a lot. Yeah, it went into overtime. But it's approved. Now that's amazing development. Is it worth the effort? I don't know. But to me, this is the kind of development, like kind of interesting developments we should be promoting. Not so much a shrink wrap, kind of homogeneous implementation of a laneway house, but unique and very architectural forms that show up that reflect the character of the person who wants to live in that house. We go next slide.
One of the things that's really key to take away from this is, you know, with the way that the policies have been set on laneway houses, is if you are within that envelope of what they're looking for in a laneway house, you don't need a year plus of committee of adjustments and appeal boards. And if you do, the variances are way less. Like, because you're performing for the most part. Let's say you wanted, I don't know, a flat roof because it's a modern design or whatever it happens to be. That's one variance now, right? Or maybe two. Like it's very different from having to just plow through a ton of variances.
The other thing to consider, whether it's one variance or whether it's 10 variances, the effort is still the same.
Yeah.
So if you think, oh, it's only one variance, let's go to the committee of adjustment, it's going to be cheaper, there's no way. It's still the same effort, it's still the same process, it's still the same time. So if you're going to go for one, go for 3. But keep them really simple, you know, like reduce work to try and ensure they can be considered minor, they can be considered desirable and appropriate, they can be considered you know, meeting the general intent of the neighborhood. Next slide.
Sorry, I just have one question. So for something like that, what does a planner build sort of look like?
Oh, okay, so.
How many zeros?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's a time shot. Okay, so.
Just so we know,
okay.
an idea of like, you know, this is what you are bypassing all of this because now the city is allowing you to.
So the that one was a consent and a minor variance. So 2 consent applications and 1 minor variance application. So it was more work. So my budget doing something like that is like $8,500. And that is from the beginning to the end.
So
That was a year,
8,500.
9 months.
$8,500.
Like less than $10,000, you did all that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a lot more than that.
Yeah, I would have thought a lot more. But that's just
Your
your
rates are
That's just your bill, but you still need like architects.
Oh yeah,
engineers,
yeah.
and,
Like I'm
coach
just the planner. I'm helping to facilitate that. You still need an architect to design your house, or a housing designer to design your house. You still need, you still need a surveyor to prepare your survey plan. You still need to pay your application fees.
To give you guys an idea, I went through something like this recently. Costs of planner plus architects plus engineering drawings, everything to get me to permit stage through the community of adjustments probably cost me about $25,000 total altogether.
So the
You can approve if you lose that.
I got approved.
No, I mean, what happens if you get approved?
If you don't get approved, so if you don't get approved, then there's appeals process, right? So, yeah, typically it's going to be more. If you have to go up to T-Lab, the nice thing about T-Lab and the OMB is they are they're a little more. They look at the rules. They're not as emotional, I think, as the Committee of Adjustments. You're like, no. But
I have a story to tell you about something that's recently happened with T-Lab.
Yeah, I've heard some nightmare stories as well.
Yeah.
But they tend to be a little more practical. They're not as emotional when they're making the decisions. Versus the COA, people that are talking at the COA, you get all sorts from like professional planners at the committee to like some guy wanting to build a bigger deck and he's like bringing up plans on a piece of paper. It's different. It's good.
That's true. Oh, sorry, I forgot I was going to say something connected to that. Oh, yeah, sorry, T-Lab. So, Volition is this. The other things I'll typically work on the community adjustment is lot splits, which is the dreaded lot split in Toronto. Someone's taking a 50-foot single and they're turning it to 225s. I'm that guy. There's been a recent decision where an applicant went to the Committee of Adjustment in Etobicoke, got refused, then appealed it to the T-Lab. City was in complete opposition because it was, that neighborhood. The T-Lab approved it. City challenged the T-Lab's approval. The chair of the T-Lab overturned the decision and refused it. We believe that the chair did that to send a message to the rest of the members that this is not something we should be doing. That overturning has been appealed. So things are dynamic in this world. If you're thinking of doing something like beyond what's permitted as a right, ensure you take the pace of check out what's going on, check out the status of those decisions, listen to what other people are saying in terms of their level of success in terms of getting those approvals. What I used to think was a short thing in lot splits is now 50-50 at best.
The money for a planner is probably some of the best money I spent.
Oh, gee.
Not to just because you're the guest tonight, but honestly, of the group of people that I hired, the most useful were the planners. It's the most practical advice you're going to get. The least useful was an architect. Honestly, the architect was expensive. My wife designed the whole thing anyway. All they did was kind of put a stamp at the end. And they were really expensive for that stamp.
You gotta find the right architect. Finding an architect, similar to finding a planner, it's about a relationship. It's about understanding the needs of the client. So, and it's finding someone that's willing to tell you this is not possible. Because the last thing you want is a yes person that will just take your money and go through an application process, and it gets refused, and you're like, well, you know. Being honest at the front, and letting you know your level of risk in going in an application like that, like these are, until these approvals came into place, these applications were risky. And you had to understand the context to determine whether that risk was palatable, whether that risk was severe. That 106 North Road, that was a risk of, like, the risk was low on that. And it was all measured by the level of support that we got on it. The only fear in towns was that if the member that we got was a little bit, you know, cowboyish on the way they approached the decision, just said, no, I don't agree with anything, I'm going to go with city staff's decision. That's the risk that you take. That's the risk of development. But it's a low risk because you'd like to think that some members are not just shooting off at the hip. I can go quickly through the approval process. If you're following the zoning, city zoning permits construction, laneway housing as of right. Fantastic, just match it. Not subject to site plan control, which is amazing. Just get your ZZC, which is your zoning notice, just confirming that you do meet the zoning. And submit your building permit 1 to 2 months approval timeframe. If you don't, if you want to do something a little bit special, if you want to do something a little outside of the box, minor variance required that must conform, that must follow the city's OP criteria, which is becoming more and more challenging as time goes on. Get your ZZC, submit obtain approval or minor variance. That's your extended time frame, submit your building permit, at least a year. Subject to no appeal, additional 8 months if you have to go to the TLAB. Just some concluding thoughts. Laneway Suites, just one option for the missing middle, as I mentioned before. It's a precursor to opening up what everyone calls the yellow belt, which is the neighborhoods. Variety of gentle, intensified forms. I love modern. Like, to me, it's like this refreshing contrast in the neighborhood. I feel like why replicate old when you can do something that's a little bit different, that reflects change. Next slide.
But any of those modern houses would all be variants.
You know what? Some of them may not be. This one is, because that's a flat roof, 3 stories. Absolutely a variance. There's no way. But it depends on when it was built. If it was built 10 years ago, which doesn't look like it was, but if it was built 10 years ago, would have been fine in terms of height. Built now needs a variance for that height because it's not a pitched roof. This probably got approval as of right. This one definitely a variance. That one definitely a variance. This might have been a zoning bylaw amendment. Townhomes. It's like the kiss of death. Next slide. I think overall this is a good first step, but I really think that these policies in the zoning, they really shrink wrap the ultimate housing form. Like, this is always what you're going to see. The only thing that you're changing is the materials. That's really all that's happening. Or if you're willing to sacrifice volume for creativity in the form, that's really the only changes you can have. You know, affordable ownership is not really solved by this option. Affordable rental is, but affordable ownership isn't. You can't sever this, so you can't really, you don't really, no, you can't get an ownership option here. The exemption for laneway housing demonstrates the over-prescriptive interpretation of neighborhoods and the need for greater flexibility in housing options. Again, they had to do a full amendment to the official plan to allow this type of housing. If the neighborhoods were flexible enough, you shouldn't even have to go to that step. So it's an indication of how prescriptive the city's official plan policies are to different types of change. Next slide. Yeah, that's it. Happy to answer any other questions.
Got a couple of questions. Just to do something, not like a really spectacular one that you designed, but just to do kind of a pretty standard one, like ballpark figure, what would be the cost?
You mean in terms of everything else?
Yeah, not you.
I wouldn't know offhand.
So we actually did some analysis on laneway costs and returns. When we're done here, we'll flip over those slides. It won't take us too long to walk through them.
Okay.
But they're estimated rent returns, estimated cost of building, that kind of stuff.
So why don't we let Alvin take
Yeah.
2 or 3 questions, and then we'll switch
Then
over
we're
to the
flipping
case
to that.
study.
Okay. I just have one, can I ask one more?
Yeah.
Is there a requirement that it has, this is a weird question maybe, but is there a requirement that it has to have a kitchen?
Yes.
Okay, so you couldn't
It
just
has
chop
to-
it up into 6 Airbnb rooms and make like $18,000.
If you can flip back to slides.
You can rough it.
You
You
can
can rough
back. We're gonna go to the zoning. Keep going back.
Yeah, you.
Okay, stop. Okay, stop here. Confirm an ancillary building can be used. Oh, go back. What happened?
No, I just started.
Oh, yeah. Okay, can be used for living accommodation. So, location so long as residential, permit short-term rental.
Permit short-term rental.
So the lot within the minimum 1.5. So I think the provisions are permissive. They're not restrictive. It doesn't say that you have to have a kitchen. It says that you can have a kitchen, which is different because before you couldn't.
Right.
So it's opening up for that option. But if you didn't want to do that,
Could you make 6 rooms?
you could do that. But then I think you're starting to turn it into a group home.
You might get
Because
stopped.
you're still one property.
Yeah.
So
you might get stopped as
What's
rooming
that
house.
maximum?
Yeah, rooming house. Yeah.
Would it be like it'd be tied to your main residence too? Like it's like total, you can only have a certain number of rooms.
Yeah, on a
and
property.
that includes your main.
Because when you go submit your plans for permit, they would look at it and be like, your bedrooms are not meeting minimum size requirements. This.
Yeah, there are different rules for rooming house.
Yeah.
And rooming house is specific. There's like a certain number of bedrooms.
Yeah.
There's rooming house, there's group home, there are other categories based on certain number of bedrooms and dwelling. You're starting to get into like hotel, boutique hotel category.
I guess that's a question of how many rooms are permitted. And
You'd probably only be able to fit 2, given the maximum size that you're allowed, which is just under 700 square feet, right?
Yeah. We're gonna throw some bunk
2
beds
per
in there.
Two bedrooms. I don't know about 2 per floor, but
yeah, just curious.
Yeah, I really think that's probably as much you can get out of it. 2 bedrooms and like not much at the ground floor if you have no parking incorporated into the little form. So like your living space, maybe there's a kitchenette in there, and then your bedrooms at the top level.
yeah, I wouldn't build a strategy around this being like an Airbnb strategy, just because those provisions and policies are so up in the
You
air.
could always put a kitchen in after if it gets.
Yeah, you might have to put a kitchen after making a long-term rental. But, you know, they were supposed to put in Airbnb restrictions, October I think it was, and then they got pushed out another year. So, it's gonna happen, it's just, I think the city's gotta get, their city's slow. So.
But this would be, so if it's just one unit, if the city, I guess maybe you don't know the answer, but like you can use your principal residence as a short-term rental, would this be included as your?
Yeah, but this is still your principal residence, right? Yeah. So this would fit the potential regulation of you only being able to Airbnb your personal residence.
Until they say except for laneway houses.
Until they, right?
Yeah, but if the law, like if the bylaw passed, then boom, if you have a kitchen in it, you can use it as a private residence. Like if it's a second suite, if you have a kitchen, that's what it said, then doesn't count as your primary residence. Because they were arguing
It
about
wouldn't be your
basement
primary
suite.
residence anyways. It can
Yeah.
never be your primary residence. It has to be a secondary suite.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. I was in the Airbnb bylaw discussion in that meeting. They were saying that even in the basement, if you have a kitchen, they don't want you to use it as an Airbnb.
Oh, we can't.
Really?
So you would have a primary residence, like you live in the house.
If it's private residence, then it's 3-room maximum. Like if you all in the same entrance and stuff.
Oh.
If it's a secondary suite in the basement with a separate entrance in the kitchen, you don't even want that.
So if you're living in the house and you wanted to Airbnb your basement, you'd have to have no kitchen. Is basically
Yeah.
what you're saying.
It's like a room in your house.
I guess they consider it a second house, and you don't want it
Yeah.
to be Airbnbs.
They want more long-term rental for the, they argue a lot.
I agree, I think we need more long-term rental in the city.
It's been half day discussing just at one point.
It's interesting that they're using a kitchen as a way of controlling it.
Yeah, and a separate entrance,
Anyway, let's focus back on
Yeah,
questions for
sorry.
Alden.
So do you focus primarily just in Toronto, or do you extend beyond that into the Durham region, or towards Hamilton?
Oh, I do work all over. So I go as far
You're
west
married
as
today?
Windsor, as far north as Huntsville, Muskoka, as far east as Cornwall, as far south as Fort Erie. 50% of my work is in Toronto, the other 50% is all around the province. I just happen to like doing
And it all doesn't feel like driving somebody else at NHBC.
This morning I was in Barrie, and tomorrow I'm going to be in Belleville. So
say hi to
I follow the client.
Matt's from Belleville.
Oh, all right. Okay.
But Michael, is this a strategy that makes sense for Durham? Like based on the cost of construction?
Well,
and everything?
the short answer, the answer for 2018 is probably no, but the answer for 2020 could be yes. And the reality is that most likely that is not, but severing is always something that's in my head as a goal, and it's on my personal skill set right now. So I like what he had to say, so I want to talk to him about it too.
Okay, so not necessarily the.
There aren't a hell of a lot of laneways anyway, other than Pickering is a little bit, but not, and Pickering prices are higher too, they're almost $7.
The reason that this is a strategy that makes sense for Toronto is because of the cost of land in Toronto.
Yeah.
And we'll go through the case study in a second. I'm just curious about your business model, if it makes sense.
So I just had a quick question. So I guess in my backyard, I do have a 3-car garage that faces onto a laneway. And I guess when I built the garage, I built it with sort of a single and then a double. But the single had flat roof. So because I wanted to put a green roof on top.
Okay.
So I guess from what you're saying, that I could use unless I change the roof line.
Well, no, I guess the question is, did you have to get a variance for any of those garages, or just got a
I
permit?
got a permit. I got a permit.
So you can utilize the garage as of right. If you expand on the garage, then whatever expansion you have to do has to meet the
If I just
bylaw
use it as
requirements.
is, then I could, okay.
Yeah. That's kind of, wow, 3-car garage.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, green roofs are exempt from any of those.
Pardon me?
Green roofs are exempt from any kind of rules about separation, setbacks. If you look at the bylaw, it kind of has exemptions all over the place for green roofs.
Is that, I guess, to encourage more people to
Do green roofs, yeah.
When you're saying existing garage structure, and it's that's to be grandfathered, what if the garage structure is built without the city's knowledge? What if it's like
Well, that's a problem.
erected and it was there? Is it then still grandfathered? Can we still use that?
If the city doesn't have record of the garage in any of their files, or if it's brought forward that, for whatever reason, there's a question, that it's contested as to whether this existed prior to a certain date, then you have to prove or give evidence that it is, that it predates this bylaw. If you can't, then you have to vary that. It essentially means that if you want to use it, you have to get a minor variance for everything in order to make it work.
So the alternative is tear it down.
Yes,
then
and just build
back
it.
up.
Yeah.
So what, the date of this bylaw, or the date of?
The date of this bylaw, yeah, so 2018. But if it was built illegally, that's a whole different realm too. I mean, if it was built illegally, then you're gonna have to tear that down too and build it up, or get it recognized.
How do you do that?
Minor variance.
So Jim, like what you have is yours.
Mine's highly illegal, I think.
Just a little bit highly illegal.
It's 2-story and it sticks out to the laneway about 3 feet.
Wow.
And it's been there for centuries.
Widely.
So,
Well, I mean, did you buy the house with it there?
yeah.
That could be illegal
Oh.
non-conforming. At some point, it goes back so far that they won't have any record, that they just have to accept that it existed.
We need to come.
Right? This is where a lawyer gets involved, where they're they kind of research and they make an argument about a legal non-conforming use, which means that the use legally existed, but doesn't conform.
Actually, title insurance might help. Or could it? I don't know.
I don't know. If there are historical surveys on the property that show it,
Actually, if
that's
you
a
look
good
at the
record.
zoning map, my garage actually shows it sticks out into the lane.
Oh, that's good.
It's
But
there.
if you have historic surveys on a property, you can pull historic surveys. If it shows the footprint of the garage, you can use that as evidence. It's always been there. You can get that from the registry office.
And I think my height is probably taller than whatever is allowed. Right?
10 meters?
So, it's too tall.
It's a silo. It's super illegal. I want to come by and see it.
No, actually, it should be within. It's 2 stories, but it's got a pitched roof. And I want to make it bigger.
I feel like that's going to be a bit of a special case.
But I live just up the street from that Northcott, 106 Northcott. So
Oh, yeah,
maybe
that's right.
they'll probably the same.
So I mean, if it exists, there's a whole separate process. You can go under 45 sub 2, which is the legal non-conforming route, which has less tests than 45 sub 1, which is the 4 tests under the minor variance. Because your only test was, did it exist? And are you using it for the same purpose? And if it existed, you're good. You're using it for the same purpose? Doesn't seem like you are. I don't know. There's also a test that allows you to use it for a different purpose. And is it similar to the purpose that you're using it before? Those tests are really easy. The city doesn't like you to use that process, but you can.
So I have one last question. When we go to apply for the building permit for this now, will they be looking at the main structure at all?
Only in relation to its relationship to the laneway suite. So distance, how much soft landscape coverage you're maintaining in the rear yard. Those are the only
But
components.
they're not
that
going to
they're
inspect that main structure?
No,
or
there's no
anything
need
like
to.
that? So, for example, if you had a single family that was operating as a triplex or something of the sort, and then you wanted to go build one of these guys, would you be safe because they wouldn't be looking at your main structure, they would be looking at what you have there?
You have to declare that your main structure is a triplex, because one of the qualifications is, are you one of the use types that are permitted to have a laneway? So if you have a triplex,
No, but if you had a
can do
single
triplex.
family.
I would say no, you're not safe. And the reason you're not safe is your laneway needs to tie into service, right? So you still need water, sewage, electricity out to your laneway. Oftentimes you're tapping that from the main house, which means when the inspectors come and do their inspection, they're going into your main property to check those connections. That's when they're coming into that property at that point.
Also, your property needs to permit quads. Because if you have a triplex and you're going to put in a laneway house, that's your 14 unit.
We have, so for example, if you have a single family that's operating a triplex, not no mid-use or anything, just a single family. But I'm just asking whether that is insulated from the process.
So, I mean, if you don't want to disclose that it is operating as a triplex, and you say this is a single detached dwelling, so long as you don't get caught, if a house is a house and you're saying that the house is what it is, then, I mean, this is not what I'm advising, but you should be fine. But if somewhere through the process you have to demonstrate what's happening to the main house, then it could be a problem.
So like,
I think tying to service is where that's going to be a problem. You could tie to service maybe in the laneway's got full service and you're tying into where the laneway is, but I think a lot of people are going into that.
Or you can bake in the basement tenant and just go through the process.
Yeah, you could do that as long as it doesn't look like something was there. But that's, I think, the risk of somebody coming into your main property is on inspection. Let's flip over to the case study. Can you hit Alt Tab? Yeah.
I'm gonna sit back.
Sorry, just one question. Do you have a business card?
Oh.
You hanging out?
Good.
Are you gonna be hanging around for a little bit after this, Elton?
Yeah, I'll be here.
Yeah,
Okay, we won't be
have
very
this place
long.
from 9 till 10. So
Oh.
after this,
Oh,
we're
okay,
just
good.
gonna
Yeah.
we're gonna
We won't be very long.
Yeah.
Elton can't stay too long, but I want to make sure that give him a chance to chat with him.
sure.
You want to walk through this, Matt?
Okay, I can do it. So the way that we looked at this was, so we're allowed roughly 700 square feet. I think the calculation was what, 670?
Yeah, 670 something square feet. That's the maximum size we're allowed.
So we're allowed roughly 700 square feet. So 700 square feet, roughly at $300 a square foot for build costs, puts you in sort of like the $200,000 range. But then on top of that, you're going to be also, you know, we're erecting this building with a garage beneath. We have to pull services as well from the main house or from the laneway. There's going to be additional costs, right? So we're estimating somewhere between 200,000 to 300,000 per 700 square feet roughly. You should be able to fit a 2-bedroom, 1 bath in there. Rent potential should be about 2,500. So your potential value increase on top of the property value should be in the 250 to 300. 250 to 300. 250 to 350 range. The way we're justifying that is because Toronto right now is roughly like $400 a door and $400 a unit. So that's why a triplex is roughly 1.2 million. But you're adding value to the property like a rental. You're not adding land or anything else. So you are kind of in that 250 to 350 range in terms of the appreciation, forced appreciation. So if we took a property value that was 1.2 million, let's say the cost of construction kind of fell in the mid-range, let's say 240. So your property value afterward possibly would be around 1.5 million. Here's something interesting. So the way that we decided to look at this was you're adding value to the property just like any reno, and just like any reno, you can refinance it afterward. And if you can refinance at 80% loan to value of the increase in value, or increase in equity, you can actually come out with, you can refinance, pull all your construction costs, and your net cost of this whole entire project could be 0. Could be. Right? Do you follow the math here?
This is we call this a BRRRR investment strategy. This is a pretty
very
common
similar.
investment strategy. Very similar.
Buy, rental, rent, refi, right? So the idea here is that the property value before is 1.2 million. I'm spending 240,000, right? So my total cost now is like 1.44 million. But the value of the property is 1.5 million. So I've, let's say, created an extra $60,000 in equity here. But if I go to refinance this and I get it appraised at 1.5 million, I can go up to 80% loan to value of the new property value, which is 1.5 million, which means that I can pull out 240,000 if I've increased the value of the property by 300,000.
And you know, for those who are familiar with this, there's obviously a bunch of not downsides, but assumptions behind this, right? So, you know, qualification on the new mortgage at a higher rate, sorry, at the higher amount. Can you do that? We're also looking at
Getting 80%.
Sorry?
Getting 80%.
Yeah, getting 80%.
Yeah,
Your appraised value might come back different, right? It might be lower, it might be higher. So there's a lot of variables, but just as a simplistic, you know, look at a model, this is what we have here.
Yeah.
So do you think that 200, 300 is a little bit too high to build that?
Yeah, I was waiting for somebody to say, because we
Yeah.
we quoted 300 a square foot, which is high. Like if you look at properties here, you can buy a nice luxury property, like you build one for like 300 a square foot. The reason when I was doing this with Matt that I said, you know what, we need to be on the high end, is because it's not like I'm building, so that 700 square feet, that's just the top floor, right? Beneath that is a garage, and that's the big unknown. Is it an existing structure? Is that existing structure have the foundation to hold that second story? Is the type of concrete thick enough? Is the density of the concrete high enough?
Or you might need to demo it and start from scratch again.
Exactly.
Which
Or you
is
may
costing
need
more
to
than starting from scratch.
bulldoze the whole thing.
Yeah.
There's variables on connecting to the utilities, like how difficult or easy is that? If we can make this work at the high end of $300 a square foot, it should make tons of sense when it's cheaper.
I was just speaking with a planner. That's actually one that used to work with Cullen's firm. So he just got quoted. He just got quoted cost of construction for his LANEWAY house, and he was at like $106,000. Mind you, he's
in the industry,
and trades and all that.
managing
But
himself.
just to give you an idea, it could come in probably for you. It probably won't come in that cheap, but it doesn't have to come in at $300 either. But Lee's right. If the business model works at the high end, then you know it's probably going to be better than that.
So Matthew, 2,500 in rent potential, I just wanna reinforce that, that's a real number, we think we can get that in a place like that?
Oh yeah.
So who has 2-bedroom condos here in Toronto?
And it'll be basically a brand new unit, so it's gonna be pretty.
What do you get in your 2-bedroom?
25, 32, as long as it's a decent neighborhood.
3,200?
That's Toronto.
Toronto's rents are through the roof. They went up, what, 10.7% year over year last year?
5.7. Sorry, 15.7.
Well, 15.7, yeah, up by 5%.
15.7%.
25 is not a crazy.
25 is still a conservative estimate.
Now on 700 square foot, 2-bedroom.
Yep, so you can advance the slide.
I want to comment on the cost, because some friends have done it in Vancouver, the cost is low, right, you're getting about $250 for both, maybe 800 square feet. And that company, the top one, is about a 2-year waiting list right now for the build.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically, if we just take a standard 5% growth model, just imagine 2 scenarios. One, we buy this property and don't do the LANEWAY house. So after 5 years, the value of the property has gone up to 1.532 million. Your rent, right from the get-go, should be about $5,700. Your cash flow about $500 a month, and your cash flow over the course of 5 years is about $57,000. Your mortgage pay down over the course of 5 years is $100,000. Total profit with your cash flow, with your mortgage pay down, and your appreciation is roughly $488,000. So I mean, this is a pretty solid 200 ROI, 203% more annualized. It's about 40%. So this is our standard. We've seen this before. We've shown this multiple times here at our Meetup. Now, the alternative model. This is where it becomes interesting. So 5% growth model on now the LANEWAY house. Sorry, the house with the LANEWAY house. Now it's 1.5 million because you've increased the value of the property. So after five years, after 5% growth model, you're at 1.9 million, 1.914. Your rents. So we estimated again $2,500 extra in rent. So you have $2,500 extra in rent. So what are your costs that go up because of that? So what have we done? We buy, rent, and refi, right?
Cost of rents.
So the cost of financing goes up, yeah, and your other stuff goes up. Possibly the property taxes, possibly your utilities and all that crap, right? So I've actually factored some of that in here, increased property taxes, increased utilities, and this has the new refinanced mortgage value in here as well. So, but your cash flow still goes through the roof, right? Even with the larger mortgage, even with the higher property tax, even with the higher utilities, your cash flow goes through the roof. So your mortgage paydown goes up as well, because we have a larger mortgage. And there's an element here that we didn't want to forget too. It's the rental equity lift. That we got a $60K bump right off the get-go, and that's also a profit on top of appreciation. So you add up all your sources of profit here: your cash flow, mortgage paydown, your appreciation, and your rental equity lift, and your profit here is about $725,000. So this is annualized ROI of about 6%. So this is your total capital injection could be the same if you went through the buy, rent, or rent, refi, and you've got all your rental costs out. So this is based on basically a 20% down payment, both models.
So, again, possibly the Remito class, let me just ask the question. So your typical, anywhere in Toronto, semi or something like that, an R zone residential home, now, as long as there's the ability of creating a secondary suite, you can do that. So if this, is that correct?
For clarity, just in the former city of Toronto, this Toronto district, Toronto East York,
Toronto.
just that boundary right now permits.
So that,
Etobicoke, like West District, Etobicoke, East District, Scarborough, North District, North York, they don't permit.
so if I'm in Old Toronto or East York, any single family home, I can, if it was a single family home with a garage laneway, I could essentially turn the house into a 2-unit dwelling, and then the garage can become the laneway. So even a single family home in any R zone can become a tri-class essentially, or three buildings.
Yeah, I believe that's in Toronto.
I'm sorry, what?
Hyde Park.
Oh, Hyde Park, yeah. Old Toronto or East?
We can chat more later. I'm doing this right now.
Okay, sorry.
No, I'd like if you want more details.
Yeah, Phil?
So doing this is sort of highly dependent on being able to do a refinance, of course. Because if you have some capital, then it's really only then like a 10% cash on cash return, and there's like you can make a much better return in other.
This is essentially the same as doing any rental, right? It's like, do you refinance after you do any rental? Is that it depends on your business model. Some people want cash or cash flow. Some people want their equity back out and they want to amplify their returns. Right?
Because if you didn't take the cash out, your cash flow is higher then, right? Sorry, if you didn't take the equity out of the property to pay off that construction, your cash flow is going to be higher.
So the business model of building laneway doesn't hinge on whether you refinance or not. The case study or the example that we're giving shows that we did refinance.
You did refinance.
Because you have to.
Because if you don't, then you're really not using any leverage, and you're
You're
just
not fully leveraged.
yeah.
It's
and
the
then
same
it's
as
Some people don't want to be fully leveraged.
right, and then you have a 10% cash on cash
Then
return.
you'll have a much higher cash on cash return because your cash flow will be a lot higher because your debt service is a lot lower, right?
It's you can think of this as any rental. This just gives you the ability to do another rental outside your main house, right?
And do you know anyone who's done a refi with a laneway house?
With a laneway house?
Like what you're talking about here? Like is
Well,
this,
I'll
this
tell you in
is
a
just-
couple of months. Like
okay, so there's no precedent yet there that you're aware of.
this is pretty new stuff.
Right.
The legislation is
Possibility.
July.
Possibilities.
Yeah, like July.
Like July.
So that's
It was like literally, it's like a month and a half.
Yeah.
So that's why we're saying that the caveats or the asterisks here is going to be your evaluation, because your evaluation has to be based on comps, right? And then you have to look for other ones that have comps. You know, but if you have an appraiser and you know what you're talking about, he knows what he's talking about, you may be able to convince him using other methods as well, like, you know, we built some secondary structure here, you can look at other ones with garden suites, you know, there's other ways to look at it as well. Or just like, oh, now you can compare us to, you know, other fourplexes that pull in this much income. You can, even though you're supposed to use the comparison approach, we can maybe help him convince him to use the income approach.
We're very good at assisting appraisers.
Yeah.
We do a lot of that. I just want to be aware of time. We're already 15 minutes past, so I'd like to wrap up then for tonight. If we could give a round of applause again. We've got this place till 10. We're going to stick around. Alvin, I know you can't stay as long, but if you're here for a couple of minutes, so feel free to come up and ask us any questions. Thank you very much for coming out tonight, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
It'd be interesting if you could. Are there any other financing options like
Because it's a new, it's basically, 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 because it's a new, it's basically.